The breader. This wasn't necessarily a home invasion situation, but it was something similar to it, nonetheless. It was a Wednesday afternoon, meaning my classes ended at around 4. I am somewhat addicted to coffee. Every time I go to class, I get myself a cup of coffee, and every time I leave my class, I get myself another cup of coffee, just to wash down the last one, I guess. And so I stopped at the coffee shop and I got myself the coffee. It was when I was leaving that something interesting happened. It must have been raining when I was in the auditorium, because it was wet outside when I was walking home with my coffee. The reason I bring this up is because that was what I heard first, the sound of puddles being stepped on. As I walked on and tried not to look back, I couldn't ignore the puddles that just kept coming closer and closer. They were catching up on me rapidly until I couldn't take it anymore. I crossed the street, and as I was walking through the other side, I looked back to see who it had been. But there was nobody. The person must have ran off as I was crossing the street. Either way, it was pretty disturbing, and I continued on with a much more careful step, but admittedly, not careful enough. By the time I reached my home, I had long forgotten about the person. Nobody was home, and it would be a while before my parents came back, so I decided to get my laptop and sat down to read through the book I got from one of my friends at school. And then I heard the scraping sound. I looked to the door and saw that the white keyhole was now black, and there was some clogging going on in there. Someone was trying to enter my home. I didn't know what to do, and so I did nothing. I just sat there and watched. This went on for almost a minute before the person pulled out whatever they had put there and went on about their day. When they stopped, I took a massive sigh of relief. Almost 30 minutes passed and nothing else happened. I got up and went to make myself toast, but as my bread was in the toaster, I heard something slam against the door. I ran to go check, and I instantly saw that the door wouldn't be able to hold for long. I grabbed my shoes and ran out of the back, and then I jumped into a bush. I waited there, hoping the person would take whatever they want and leave, but they didn't. Instead, the person ran out and appeared out of the back door, and it took everything in me to hold my breath. It was a lady with tattoos on the side of her face and neck. She wore dreadlocks, and her teeth had decayed. She looked around the back for me, and just then, I heard a honking sound. My dad said they saw the door slammed into all the way from the parking, and so that's why they honked. But either way, I am glad they did. This honking made the woman look back, and then she ran away and jumped over the fence before she finally ran off into the distance. And that was that. We simply didn't call the police. The mover. So this happened back when I moved to an apartment which was much closer to my work. I'd only moved to the place because I wanted to move to a warmer apartment, but it was also more spacious and even cheaper. I never could understand why the place was like that until I moved to the place and saw what kind of neighborhood it was. The homeless problem had reached unbelievable levels. It's hard to walk through the streets without stumbling on a man, his needles, or his public bathroom. On other days though, it can be a bit cooler and you can walk out in the public. This was one of those days. I'd woken up in the morning and it was cold, so the streets were mostly dispersed. I decided that I could walk to work for once. After work, it was warmer, but not by much, so I could walk home too. I grabbed my coat and said my goodbyes, and when one of my coworkers offered to drive me home, I said I'd walk. A look of shock crossed his face, and he said even he wouldn't walk through my neighborhood, and he was insistent. But I had made up my mind. I was walking. And for a while, nothing happened as I walked. I did meet some people, but they were people going about their day too. It wasn't until much further that I saw a man. He was not wearing any shoes, and he wore a green jumper with brown pants, and he was standing right in front of me. I walked around him, and he moved to my path. Then I tried again, and he moved to my path again. Eventually, though, I crossed the street and walked away. And that was when I realized that I should never walk again. I arrived at my house, and feeling uncomfortable, I locked the door so he wouldn't be able to come in if he decided to. When I heard that click sound, I don't know what happened. I guess I thought a force field had been wrapped around the place and nothing wrong could ever happen. Basically, I completely dropped my guard and I went about my day as I normally do. After my bath, I got into bed just to rest for a bit before making myself dinner. And I must have fallen asleep. Then I heard something breaking downstairs, followed by an animalistic growl. Immediately my arms flashed up with chicken skin. I had no idea what the hell that was. I ran to the doors and peeked out, trying to get an idea as to what could have possibly been happening. And when I looked out, I made eye contact with a man on his feet. It was the guy from the street. For a moment, my brain couldn't process seeing him in my room like that. But after it did, I slammed the door. I knew that I couldn't be there with him. I had to leave the house. I looked around and I saw only one open exit, the window. I ran to the window and slipped out. But when I got out, I realized it was a lot higher than I'd imagined. I couldn't jump. Instead, I walked around the ceiling, trying to decide on my next move. I could see people walk down the streets, and some took out their phones to take a picture of me, but I didn't care. I was just too scared. And just when I was starting to think things couldn't get worse, I looked around and saw the man was standing on the rooftops. He was up there with me. I screamed and fell on my knees. I begged him to stop and leave me alone. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw no anger, no hate, but there was no compassion either. His eyes looked like he thought he was dreaming, and his speech was literally hanging from his chin as he tried to speak, but only succeeded in letting out these weird sounds. I knew this man could kill me, and he wouldn't even know what he'd done, and when all my hope was gone, I felt a hand grab my ankle. It was a cop. He helped me climb down, and that was that. It brought a ladder, and the other cops were down too. When I got down, they went back up to arrest the man, and they carried him off. He was never charged for anything. The sleeper. Ever since I've been a teenager, I've always loved falling asleep when it's raining. It has become something of a family tradition, you see. My mother used to do it all the time when I was a child, and so I picked up on it in my teens, and now I am just used to it. And so whenever I can sense it is about to rain, I put away all my work and get into a comfortable position. This is what I had been doing on that day that this happened. It was midday, but the sky was clogged with clouds, and the rain was coming. As the rain started falling, I got really drowsy, but I couldn't sleep. You see, for some reason, my wife thought that was the perfect time to start drying her hair, and it was all so loud. And as I was laying there, trying to catch some sleep, I noticed something moving outside. It was a man, dressed in a black raincoat. He ran across the lawn and turned around the side of the house. He was heading to the door. And at that moment, I just gave up on sleeping. I sat up and waited to hear the doorbell, but it never came. I sat there for a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but no, the guy simply didn't ring the bell. At this point, I decided that something was absolutely wrong. Maybe he fell or something. So I got up and went to look for him. I sat there for a minute, 5 minutes, and so on. When I opened the door, there was nobody outside. I looked around the open door, but no matter where I looked, I just couldn't find the man. So I went to the window again, but no, couldn't find him. By then, I will admit, I was starting to feel somewhat concerned. I was no longer looking for him for his concern. I was looking for him for my own. I went to the kitchen and looked out the window, but he wasn't there. I even went to the garage and looked, but no, the man was simply nowhere to be found. Deciding that he was gone and I'd probably never find him, I went back to the couch and rested. Maybe he was gone. I was just passing by. But that thought didn't satisfy me. My house doesn't lead to anywhere special. Anyone walking down the pathway can only be trying to go to one place. This house. And that's when I heard it. My wife letting out a rattling scream. I jumped up to my feet and dashed to the stairs. But before I could reach the top, she reached me, screaming and yelling. And all the time I'd known her, I never knew she could make such a feminine sound. She isn't the girly type kind of girl, and yet there she was, shivering against my chest. She pointed to the bathroom and said there was a man there. She saw his face on the mirror, and so I picked up a broom and went to the bathroom. I kicked the door open, swinging in, but the guy was nowhere to be seen. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. She said he must have escaped through the window. We spent the whole day looking, but we eventually decided he was probably gone. For a good measure, I personally locked all the doors, then I locked the windows. By night time, we were sure we were safe, and we fell asleep easily. But then, as I was sleeping, I heard a rubbing sound. It sounded like grating stones, and it was coming from directly outside the wall above my head. I woke up and listened to it for a minute, but then I heard the sound again. 3 grating sounds. I yelled at the man to get the hell away from us, and the sound immediately stopped. Then I heard it, a rumbling from the hallways. I ran out to the hallways and saw a guy in black running down the stairs. I chased him, only to find that there were 3 of them, and that they were running out of my house's door. After we called the cops, they never could find anything about the man, but now I live in constant concern that they may be back to take even more from the things that they already took from.